Let's discuss my favorite topic for a while, and that would be grammar. And a verb in its basic form is known as an infinitive. Infinitives in English, examples of infinitives would be to eat, to go, to be, to sleep. No one's doing the action, it's just the idea of the action. If I were to conjugate or change the verb to eat in order to make it fit a subject, I would change to eat to you eat, he eats, I eat, they eat, she eats. It's just a matter of changing the verb to match the subject. Spanish has infinitives as well, and they end in either AR, ER, or IR. Okay? So let's read this. It says presente de los verbos en AR en el singular. It's the present tense of AR verbs in the singular. All verbs or action words in Spanish belong to a family or conjugation. Verbs whose infinitives end in AR, such as hablar, to speak, comprar, to buy, are called first conjugation verbs. I give you some examples. Necesitar is to need, buscar, to look for, mirar, to watch, comprar, to buy, hablar, to speak, and pagar, to pay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at how do you conjugate these verbs for the subject. How is that done? And then we can begin to build sentences based off of these conjugations. Hmm. So in the yo form, hablar would change into hablo, I speak. In the tu form, hablar changes into hablas, you speak. In the el form, hablar turns into habla, he speaks. In the ella form, hablar turns into habla, she speaks. So you see, it's really very simple. You just take off the AR at the end, and you're left with what's known as a stem, HABL, and you just add the endings, which you can see here are O, AS, A, and A, respectively. Yo compro, aba, tú compras, you buy, él compra, he buys, ella compra, she buys. Yo miro, I watch, tú miras, you watch, él mira, he watches, ella mira, she watches. So we'll get into this a little bit more in class. How do you change this verb form, okay, so that it matches the subject? And let's look at number three. It says, since the ending of the verb in Spanish indicates who performs the action, the subjects yo, tú, él, and ella are often omitted. So if I say hablo español, hablo can only be one person. That's yo, that's I. So when I say hablo español, I don't need to say yo hablo español, just hablo español. And the yo is included in that verb conjugation. If I say hablas español, I'm saying you speak Spanish because hablas can only be talking about tú. Now, a little bit different for habla. I may need to say él habla or ella habla or usted habla. to make it clear who's doing the speaking there. But otherwise, for the yo form, the tú form, and then later the nosotros form, you don't even need to include the pronoun. It's unnecessary. So in real terms, what does this look like? Let's look at our illustration. It says, hablo español. Use the ending O. Attach O to the stem, H-A-B-L, when you talk about yourself. Hablas español. Use AS ending when you talk to a friend. Hablas español. You speak Spanish. Use A ending when you talk about someone else. Habla español. Él habla español. Él habla. He speaks Spanish. So you have your first person O ending, your second person AS ending, and your third person A ending. And we'll practice with this a little bit more in a moment. Right now, I want to go over the vocabulary, the first set of vocabulary for this unit. But before we get into that vocabulary, I do want to remind you of something. It says to make a sentence negative, put no in front of the verb. In English, we would say, I don't speak. We use a helping verb, do or does. He doesn't speak. But in Spanish, you just throw no in front of the verb conjugate. So, hablo español, I speak Spanish. No hablo francés. We would say in English, I don't speak French. But honestly, that's no, I speak French. Okay, so the negation comes in front of the conjugated verb, and there is no helping verb, there's no auxiliary verb, there's no do or does there, even though it's translated that way the way in English. Look at the next sentence. It says, necesita una hoja de papel. She needs a piece of paper. No necesita una pluma. She doesn't need a pen. Okay, so just throw no in front of the conjugated verb and forget that whole idea of needing a helping verb there. So let's look at our vocabulary for this first part of chapter 3. We have los materiales escolares. That's school materials, school supplies. So we have un cuaderno, un bloc, and I prefer that you call this un cuaderno. Un cuaderno. It's just a spiral or a notebook. Un cuaderno. Then you have una carpeta. Una carpeta is a folder. It could be any type of folder, but it's generally that thing we think of with pockets and brads. And then we have la mochila. La mochila is the backpack. And I think that's been a constant for decades, the backpack. La mochila. What do you have in la mochila? In su mochila. What do you have in your backpack? The next item is un libro. Un libro is just a book. And una hoja de papel, a sheet of paper. I like to call it un pedazo de papel, a piece of paper. If you want to call it una hoja de papel, that's fine, or just papel, or paper. And finally, we have several items that are important. We have una calculadora, a calculator, un marcador, a marker, un bolígrafo, or as I like to call it, una pluma, or a pen, una goma de borrar. It's an eraser. You can just call it una goma. That's fine. Un lápiz is a pencil. Dos lápices are two pencils. So you have the plural lápiz and the singular lápiz and the plural lápices. And then we have finally un disquete, which we do not use anymore. I should tell you how old this textbook is. We don't use disc. A CD is what we would use now, or maybe even a pen drive. So, and it's funny how a lot of words in Spanish and English are cognates, like a disc, a disquete. If you were to say, give me a dame, say CD, somebody would know you're talking about a compact disc. So some of these words for technical things are pretty much the same in English and Spanish. And there's a reason for that, and we'll discuss it in class later. All right, so these are our vocabulary words, and we'll do some exercises with them.